This movie starts with a young boy named Kyle and his mom, Rebecca, moving to a small town in the United States. It was Kyle's first day at his new school. He said bye to his mom and rode his bike to school. When he got to the classroom, the teacher introduced him and asked him to find a seat. Later, the teacher wanted a boy named Jason to show his science project. But when Jason tried to go up, a troublemaker named Rick tripped him on purpose. This made Jason fall, and his science project got ruined. Sadly, Jason was too scared to tell the teacher because of Rick. Surprisingly, it was Kyle who told the teacher about the incident. So, Rick got a 2-week suspension. But Rick couldn't handle the punishment, so he and his buddies decided to confront Jason after school, wanting to hurt him. Luckily, Kyle stepped in and faced off against Rick and his friends. Even though Kyle was smaller than Rick, he managed to beat them easily. After this, Kyle left school to head home. However, Jason quickly followed him and asked to be friends. At first, Kyle was hesitant because he was a shy and not so social guy. But Jason kept persuading him, and eventually, Kyle agreed. Before long, they were approached by Rick's older brother, Jack, who was furious when he heard that Kyle had defeated Rick. Jack went to Kyle and Jason to confront them. Rick was confident that his big brother could beat Kyle and Jason easily. However, Kyle cleverly stood his ground and even scratched Jack's car. This made Jack very angry, and he started chasing Kyle and Jason in his car. They tried to escape on their bikes, but they ended up getting cornered by a canal after a few attempts. At first, Jack didn't think Kyle and Jason could cross the canal, but they boldly jumped the canal with their bikes and ended up at an airstrip. They managed to escape Jack and came across a guy named Ed, who was Jason's uncle and worked as a pilot and aircraft mechanic at the hangar. Jason introduced Kyle to Ed, who asked if he liked airplanes. Kyle admitted he didn't know because he'd never been on one. Upon hearing this, Ed kindly invited both Kyle and Jason to board a small plane and took them on a thrilling flight in the sky. Kyle and Jason had a blast during the flight. Afterward, Ed dropped them off at Jason's house. There, Kyle was introduced to Jason's lively family, which was quite different from Kyle's situation. He lived with his mom in a hotel. Jason also introduced Kyle to his sick grandfather named Jansen, who proudly shared that he used to be a decorated United States military pilot. Later, Jason and his mother escorted Kyle to his place. However, Kyle fibbed by pretending he lived in a fancy house. But when Jason and his mom left, Kyle returned to the hotel where he and his mom were staying. The next day, Kyle and Jason hung out together again. They were both hooked on the idea of flying, so they headed back to the spot where they could see the airplanes. This time, Jason brought a walkie-talkie to keep in touch while they were on a plane watching adventure. They ventured into a hangar and spotted a much bigger airplane than the others. Initially, they were just curious and decided to explore the plane by getting inside. But things took an unexpected turn when several people entered the hangar and boarded the plane. Worried about getting caught, Kyle and Jason scrambled to hide in the cargo hold of the plane. A little while later, the plane started moving, left the hangar, and took off into the sky. After some time, the plane landed at an airport. Meanwhile, a group of men showed up and brought bags that seemed to contain money onto the plane. Afterward, the plane took off once more, leaving the airport behind. While they were on the plane for a bit, Kyle and Jason started feeling hungry. They began searching for some food and decided to open one of the bags they'd seen earlier. The bag didn't contain food, it held a bomb instead. This discovery left Kyle and Jason terrified. They desperately tried to alert the pilot and quickly got out of the cargo hold. Surprisingly, they found out that the plane was flying without a pilot, and this left them with no choice but to take control of the plane, even though they had never flown an aircraft before. In the heat of the moment, Kyle was unsure about what to do with the bomb. Jason, who was in the cockpit, gave Kyle instructions to drop the bomb. Kyle followed Jason's command right away, and the bomb ended up landing on a farmer's house, causing a huge explosion that destroyed it. After dealing with the bomb, Kyle helped Jason with flying the plane. They did their best to avoid crashing into anything or hitting a mountain. Eventually, after flying in the sky for a while, the plane ran out of fuel and they had to make an emergency landing on a road. Kyle and Jason worked hard to steer the plane safely during its descent, making sure it wouldn't harm anyone. Eventually, they managed to successfully land the plane without incident. Meanwhile, Ed was spotted at the cafe where Rebecca worked. Both of them were taken aback by the news of Kyle and Jason's heroic landing, earning them the nickname the Sky Kids. Since that remarkable incident, Kyle and Jason became local celebrities and the talk of the town. Their newfound fame also attracted the attention of a man named Angelo, who turned out to be the owner of the plane and the bag with the bomb. At the same time, two guys named Lenny and Silvio appeared nervous as they watched the news about Kyle and Jason because they were the ones who planted the bomb on the plane. Lenny and Silvio were Angelo's henchmen, but they had tried to betray and harm Angelo. However, their plot was accidentally thwarted by Kyle and Jason. The following day, as Jason and Kyle returned to school as usual, Jack reappeared and seemed intent on confronting them. But at that moment, two individuals claiming to be FBI agents arrived and asked Kyle and Jason to go with them. Remembering their previous fear of Jack, they decided to cooperate with these supposed agents. After a lengthy journey, Kyle and Jason soon realized that the supposed FBI agents were actually Angelo's henchmen. However, these two men reassured them, promising that Kyle and Jason wouldn't be harmed by their boss. Upon reaching Angelo's house, Kyle and Jason were led to a room filled with video games and toy guns. When Angelo's henchmen departed, Kyle and Jason picked up toy guns and started playing. Meanwhile, Angelo observed Kyle and Jason from behind a glass wall, reminiscing about his own childhood memories with Silvio. Surprisingly, these memories had many similarities with the adventures of Kyle and Jason. Eventually, Angelo decided to join in the game with them, taking two toy guns. After they had their share of fun, Angelo asked Silvio and Lenny to accompany Kyle and Jason back home. He also provided them with a bag of food for the journey. While they were on their journey, Jason pulled out his walkie-talkie and turned it on. They discovered that Lenny had another walkie-talkie with him. This revelation made Kyle and Jason realize that these two men were the ones responsible for placing the bomb in the plane. Lenny also felt threatened, worrying that Kyle and Jason might report their actions to Angelo. This tense situation led to a heated argument between Lenny and Silvio. Eventually, Lenny agreed to Silvio's suggestion to pull over and take a break to calm down. Silvio, who had known Angelo since childhood, tried to explain to Lenny that being honest might lead to forgiveness from Angelo. Unfortunately, Lenny refused to listen and went as far as shooting Silvio. Witnessing this shocking act, Kyle and Jason panicked and decided to escape to ensure their safety. Lenny pursued them, firing shots along the way. Meanwhile, as Silvio was nearing the end of his life, he wanted to inform Angelo about what had transpired. Sadly, before he could reveal everything, Silvio passed away. On another front, Lenny, who had been chasing Kyle and Jason for some time, finally caught Kyle and brought him to a hangar. When they arrived there, they encountered Ed, and Lenny forced Ed to fly the plane. At first, Ed was willing to cooperate with Lenny as long as Kyle could go free, but Lenny threatened to harm them both. Around the same time, Jason arrived at the hangar and saw that Kyle was in grave danger. Jason courageously pursued the plane and managed to get inside. This action alerted Ed to the fact that Kyle and Jason were in trouble. As the plane ascended into the sky, Kyle and Jason glared angrily at Lenny. This made Lenny furious, and he tried to subdue them. Luckily, Ed intervened by tilting the plane, thwarting Lenny's attempts. Feeling trapped, Lenny attempted to shoot Ed, but he failed. Ed also got up from his seat and attempted to confront Lenny, while Jason swiftly took over Ed's role as the pilot. As Jason kept steering the plane, Ed felt the pressure from Lenny. To divert Lenny's attention, Kyle tossed the money he'd taken from Angelo. This made Lenny furious, and he shot Kyle, causing him to tumble from the plane. Seeing this, Ed and Jason leaped after Kyle to save him. Ed, clutching a parachute, struggled to reach Kyle and Jason's hands. After a few tries, Ed finally managed to grab hold of them. Quickly, Ed deployed the parachute and they landed safely. Meanwhile, Angelo became aware of Kyle and Jason's peril and started searching for them with a helicopter. Eventually, he located Kyle, Jason, and Ed shortly after their landing. Kyle and Jason then informed Angelo that Lenny had killed Silvio when he attempted to save them. Angelo looked deeply saddened by Silvio's unexpected death. However, he couldn't do anything about Lenny, who was still on the plane. Regrettably, Lenny lost control of the plane and it crashed into a hill, exploding on impact. Afterward, Angelo took the three of them back to their homes. Upon arrival, Kyle and Jason apologized for the plane incident. However, Angelo assured them that the plane and money were not as important as their safety. He even offered Ed a job as a private pilot, but Ed declined, content with his role as a mechanic. Later, Ed brought Kyle and Jason to Jason's house. He asked them not to tell their parents about the recent events. After Ed left, Kyle admitted to Jason that he didn't live in the fancy house he had shown them, but in a hotel. However, Jason didn't mind at all, which made Kyle happy and relieved. When Kyle returned home, Jason headed inside his house to a warm welcome from his entire family. Jason's grandfather, who had been eagerly waiting, felt a sense of pride when he saw the newspaper article about Kyle and Jason successfully saving the plane. To show his appreciation, Jason's grandfather gave one of his medals to Jason as a token of gratitude. Meanwhile, Rebecca stayed by Kyle's side as he slept, wearing a proud and happy expression for what Kyle and Jason had accomplished in saving the plane. Later on, Angelo instructed his henchmen to deal with Jack so that he wouldn't bother Kyle and Jason anymore. On the flip side, Ed, Jason, Kyle, and his mom were strolling around the hangar. Some of Angelo's henchmen approached Ed, and at first, he thought they were going to offer him a job as a pilot, which he would have turned down. But to his surprise, they gifted Ed with a flying plane. Eventually, Ed took Kyle, Jason, and Rebecca on a flight with his new plane, and that's how the Sky Kids movie came to an end. The moral lesson from this story is, don't open strange bags on a plane. They might contain an unexpected adventure instead of snacks.